I collapsed on the 40-yard line at 3:17 on a Tuesday. 40 kids watched their coach die. My assistant coach breathed life back into my chest. My daughter never left my hospital bed. My wife never came. And the secret my little girl had been carrying for 3 months was the thing that finally broke everything wide open. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back. My name is Reed Calloway. I am 48 years old. I am the assistant principal and head football coach at Westlake High School in Austin, Texas. I have held that job for 11 years, and in that time I have won 3 district titles, lost 2 heartbreakers in the playoffs, and convinced approximately 400 teenage boys that running in the August heat builds character. Whether or not that last part is true remains an open question. I drove a silver pickup truck. I made brisket on Sundays that the neighbors would find excuses to walk past the house for. And I was married to a woman named Shelby for 13 years, which at the time I believed was a happy marriage, because I am, as it turns out, significantly better at reading a defensive formation than I am at reading the woman sleeping next to me. It was a Tuesday in October. Practice was running long because our starting quarterback had decided that the concept of a play-action pass was, in his words, confusing. I had explained it 4 times. Dex, my assistant coach, my best friend since college, the man who once tripped over a cooler on the sideline during homecoming and took out the entire Gatorade table in front of 3,000 people, was running the defensive line through drills on the far end of the field. The air smelled like cut grass and dust. The sun was low enough to throw long shadows across the yard lines. I blew my whistle, called the offense to reset, and then the world tilted sideways. I did not feel pain. That is the part nobody believes. But it is true. There was no clutching my chest. No dramatic collapse, like you see in the movies. One moment I was standing on the 40-yard line holding a clipboard. The next moment I was looking up at the sky, and the sky was getting further away. Like someone was slowly turning the volume down on everything. The shouting. The footsteps. Dex screaming my name from across the field. Then nothing. They told me later what happened. Dex covered 40 yards in what the kids said was the fastest they had ever seen a man his size move. He dropped to his knees, started chest compressions, and yelled at the nearest player to call 911. That player was Marcus Rivera, a sophomore safety, who Dex later said handled it with more composure than most adults would have. I coded on the field. My heart stopped right there on the 40-yard line with chalk dust on my shorts and a whistle still around my neck. The paramedics got there in 6 minutes. I coded again in the ambulance. And I coded a 3rd time in the emergency room at St. David's Medical Center, where a team of people whose names I would not learn until much later fought to keep me in a world I was apparently not finished with yet. 3 times my heart stopped. 3 times someone decided it was not my day to go. I have thought about that a lot since then. 3 chances. Most people do not get one. What I remember from the in-between is not what you would expect. There was no tunnel, no light, no dead relatives waving from a golden meadow. What I remember is silence. A deep, complete, almost beautiful silence. Like standing in the middle of an empty football field at night with no lights and no sound, and no one waiting for you on either sideline. Just stillness. And somewhere in that stillness, a voice. Sharp. Commanding. The kind of voice that does not ask permission. Stay with me, Mr. Calloway. Stay with me. That was Dr. Anand Patel. I would meet him properly 7 days later, but his voice found me in the dark before I ever saw his face. When I opened my eyes, the world came back in pieces. Fluorescent light. The hum of machines. A smell like antiseptic and stale coffee. Tubes in places. I did not know tubes could go. And sitting in the chair beside my bed, curled up with her shoes off, and her hair unwashed and dark circles under her eyes that made her look 10 years older than 16, was my daughter Chloe. She was asleep. Her hand was resting on the edge of my bed, close enough to touch. I found out later she had been there every single day. She had told the school she had a family emergency. She had taken a bus to the hospital each morning and stayed until the nurses made her leave at night. 7 days. She did not miss one. I looked around the room. There were flowers on the windowsill. The card said, "From your Westlake family." There was a football on the bedside table, and when I looked closer, I could see it was covered in signatures. Every kid on the team. There was a handmade banner taped to the wall that read, "Come back, Coach C," in green and gold, our school colors, with drawings that suggested the artistic abilities of teenage boys, which is to say they were terrible and absolutely perfect. And there was an empty chair on the other side of the bed, the side where my wife should have been sitting. Chloe woke up when she heard me shift. Her eyes went wide and wet, and she grabbed my hand with both of hers and squeezed so hard, I thought she might restart my heart a fourth time. "Dad. Oh my God. Dad." "Hey, kid," I managed. My voice sounded like someone had dragged it across gravel. "How long have I been out?" "7 days. She was crying now, not even trying to hide it. "7 days, Dad." Dr. Patel came in 20 minutes later. He was a calm, precise man in his early 50s, with the kind of steady authority that made you want to listen, even when what he was saying terrified you. He explained the situation. Massive cardiac event. A blockage that should have killed me, and very nearly did. Emergency intervention. I would need months of recovery, monitoring, and absolutely zero stress. I almost laughed at that last part. "Your wife," he said carefully, setting down his clipboard, "has been informed of your condition. She has been calling regularly." "Calling," I repeated. He gave me a look I did not fully understand in that moment. The same look I would later recognize on the faces of people who knew something they wished they did not. Francine came in next. My nurse. A woman in her mid-50s, with the energy of someone who had seen every possible version of human behavior and had long ago stopped being surprised by any of it. She adjusted my IV with the efficient calm of someone who could do it in her sleep. "Welcome back, Coach," she said without looking up. "Has my wife been here?" I asked. Francine's face did something small and careful. The kind of micro-expression that trained professionals use when the truth is not their job to deliver, but the lie is not something they are willing to carry either. "She has been calling," Francine said. "Every day, checking in, calling, not visiting, not sitting in that empty chair, not holding my hand the way my 16-year-old daughter had for 7 straight days. Calling." Now, before I go any further, I want to ask you something. If you are listening to this story right now and you are not subscribed, go ahead and fix that. It costs you nothing, and it means more than you know. Trust me, you are going to want to be here for what comes next. That first night I was awake, Chloe sat with me until the nurses told her visiting hours were over. We did not talk much. She held my hand. She told me about school, about the team checking in on her, about Dex calling every morning to ask if I had woken up yet. And then, right before she left, she stopped at the door. She turned around and looked at me with eyes that held something I could not quite name, something that was not just relief, not just love, something heavier, something older than any 16-year-old should ever have to carry. "Dad," she said. And then she stopped. "What is it, sweetheart?" She shook her head, pressed her lips together, blinked hard. "Nothing. I am just glad you are here." She left. And I lay there in that hospital bed, surrounded by machines that had literally kept me alive, staring at the empty chair where my wife should have been, and I felt the first crack. Small, almost invisible, like a hairline fracture in a wall. You have lived inside for 13 years and never once thought to question. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. And my daughter knew what it was. Shelby called that evening. Her voice was warm and worried, and perfectly textured with all the right notes of a concerned wife receiving terrible news. It was, and I mean this as a genuine observation, an excellent performance. "Baby," she said, "I have been so scared. How are you feeling? Is the doctor taking care of you?" I coded 3 times, "Shelby." A pause. The kind of pause that is just a fraction of a second too long. The kind most people would never notice. I noticed. I know, Reed. It has been the hardest week of my life not being there. You have no idea. Then come. Silence. Not a pause this time. Silence. The kind that has weight and shape and tells you everything the words that follow are going to try to hide. Read. The trip is in 2 days. We have already paid for everything. The flights, the resort, the spa package. Lindsay has been planning this for months. It is non-refundable. I lay there staring at the ceiling. The fluorescent light above me buzzed the way fluorescent lights always do in hospitals. Like the building itself is trying to remind you that this is not a place where good things happen. Shelby. I said her name the way you say a word when you need the person hearing it to understand that what comes next is not a negotiation. I almost died. 3 times. And you are stable now. You are okay. You have doctors. You have nurses. Chloe is right there. She said our daughter's name like it was a solution. Like a 16-year-old girl was an acceptable substitute for a wife. It is only 5 days, Reed. I will be there the second we get back. I promise. I closed my eyes. In the background, I could hear the steady beep of the heart monitor, the same heart that had stopped 3 times, and was now beating in a chest that felt suddenly hollow, for reasons that had nothing to do with cardiology. Who are you going with? I asked. Lindsay and the girls. You know this. I did know this. Lindsay and the girls. The answer that had been deployed with quiet consistency for the past 2 years whenever I asked about weekend getaways, late Thursday evenings, and the kind of unexplained absences that I had never once questioned because I was a man who trusted his wife completely and without reservation. Lindsay and the girls was the most reliable alibi in our marriage. I just did not know it was an alibi yet. Okay, I said. She sounded surprised. Maybe relieved. Possibly both. Yeah, I said quietly. Have a good trip, Shelby. I hung up. And I lay there in that hospital bed, in the hum and beep of machines that had literally kept me alive, and I felt something settle inside me. Not anger. Not yet. Something quieter than anger. Something colder. Something that moved into the space behind my ribs where the pain used to be, and made itself very comfortable. Dex came to see me the next morning. He walked in holding a brown paper bag from Hal's on 6th Street, our regular spot, the place where we had eaten brisket after every single home game for 11 years. He looked at the hospital tray on my table, looked back at me, and said without missing a beat, "They are trying to kill you a 4th time." I laughed. First time since waking up. It hurt my chest and I did not care. He pulled up a chair and sat down the way Dex always sits down, like the chair personally offended him, and he is choosing to forgive it. And for a while, we just talked. About the team. About Marcus Rivera stepping up at safety. About the time Dex tripped over the cooler at homecoming and took out the entire Gatorade table in front of 3,000 people, which he still insists was the cooler's fault, and which I still bring up at least twice a year, purely for the joy of watching him deny it. And then, like someone flipping a switch, his face changed. Has Shelby been in? He asked. She is coming, I said. She just has some things to sort out first. Dex nodded. Slowly. The way people nod when they do not believe you but love you too much to say so. Dex? Yeah? What are you not telling me? He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and stared at the floor for a long time. Dex Carter is the worst liar I have ever known. This is a man who once tried to throw me a surprise birthday party, and told me about it 3 days early because, and I quote, the secret was eating him alive. He cannot hold a secret the way a colander cannot hold water. It just goes right through him. He was holding something now. Something heavy. I could see it in his shoulders. Nothing, man. I just want you to focus on getting better. That is all. I let it go. I was tired. I was weak. And honestly, a part of me, a part I am not proud of, did not want to know. They flew out on a Thursday. I know this because Dex mentioned the airport traffic when he came by that afternoon, not realizing he was confirming something he did not know I was tracking. I know it because Francine, professional unflappable Francine, came in to check my vitals and asked if I had any family coming this weekend. And I know it because I called the house 3 times on Thursday evening and nobody answered. I lay in that hospital bed for 5 days. Alone. Chloe came every afternoon after school. She brought her homework and did it in the chair beside me. And sometimes we talked and sometimes we just existed in the same room without needing words, which is a kind of love that I think only fathers and daughters truly understand. But at night when she went home, it was just me and the machines. 5 nights of ceiling tiles and fluorescent buzzing and the quiet company of a man slowly becoming someone he did not recognize yet. The doctors said I came back from the dead. What they did not know was that the man who came back was not entirely the same man who went under. He was softer on the outside, quieter. He smiled more, asked people how they were doing and genuinely meant it. But underneath all of that, in the place where the silence had settled during those 7 days of nothing, something new had taken root, something patient, something precise, something that was paying very, very close attention. They came home on a Sunday. I had been discharged 2 days earlier. Chloe had driven me home in my own truck, carefully, like the truck was made of glass, and I had sat in the passenger seat and watched the Austin skyline pass, and thought about how strange it is to see a city you have lived in for 20 years and feel like you are looking at it for the first time. When Shelby walked through that front door, tanned and laughing, rolling a suitcase behind her with the easy energy of a woman returning from the vacation of a lifetime, I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. "Welcome home," I said. She smiled, dropped her bags, came over and hugged me with the kind of warmth that felt genuine enough to fool anyone who was not specifically looking for the seams. I was specifically looking for the seams. She talked for 15 minutes about the beach, the sunsets, the margaritas, a restaurant on the water where the fish tacos were apparently life-altering. She talked with her hands the way she always did when she was animated, and I stood there, mug in hand, nodding in all the right places, watching. Because here is what I noticed. In 15 minutes of talking about a 5-day vacation, she mentioned Lindsay exactly once. In passing. Like a footnote in a story that was not really about Lindsay at all. "Did Lindsay enjoy the fish tacos?" I asked. A pause. Half a second. Microscopic. "She loved them." "Good," I said. I smiled. "We should have Lindsay and Brett over for dinner sometime." "What is his name again?" "Brett, right?" Shelby looked at me over the rim of her mug. Something flickered behind her eyes. Quick. Controlled. "Brett. Yeah. That would be fun." Neither of us meant it. That night, after Shelby had gone to bed, Chloe knocked on my bedroom door. She came in and sat on the edge of the bed. She did not say anything for a long time. Just sat there, hands in her lap, looking at the floor the way she used to look at the floor when she was little and had something to confess. "Dad," she said quietly, "are you okay? Like, really okay?" I looked at my daughter, 16 years old, carrying something behind her eyes that I had seen in the hospital and was seeing again now. Something heavier than worry. Something older than her years. "I am getting there, kid." She nodded, leaned over and hugged me, held on a little longer than usual. Then she left. I lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling and thought about 3 things. The empty chair, the phone call, and the look in my daughter's eyes that told me she knew something that was going to change everything. There is a particular kind of power in being underestimated by the person who is supposed to know you best. Shelby thought she was still talking to the man who coached football and made bad puns at dinner and never once questioned where she went on Thursday nights. She was 13 years wrong. Let me tell you something about surviving a near-death experience that nobody puts on the motivational posters. It does not make you fearless. It does not flood you with gratitude and light and a sudden passion for running marathons. What it actually does, at least what it did to me, is make you precise. Suddenly you have 0 tolerance for noise, 0 patience for performance. You start seeing people not as who they present themselves to be, but as the sum of their choices. And choices, unlike words, do not lie. I went back to work 3 weeks after I died. Dr. Patel had advised another 2 weeks of rest. Dex had advised me with the dramatic urgency of a man who believed he was personally responsible for keeping my heart beating from now until the end of time. I overruled them both. I needed to move. I needed to be somewhere that felt real. Dex met me at the field house door at 7:15 in the morning. He was wearing the same green Westlake polo he wore every single day and holding a coffee in each hand, which meant he had been there since at least 6:30, preparing for my arrival the way a man prepares for a dignitary visit. He looked at me, opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Before you say anything," he started. "Good morning, Dex. I just want to say that I support you, whatever you are going through, and I am here for you, and also you look terrible. Thank you. I missed you too." We walked through the field house and out toward the practice field, and that is when I saw it. Tied to the chain-link fence that ran along the south end zone, a banner. Not the handmade one from the hospital. A new one, professionally printed, green and gold, 20 feet long. "Welcome back, Coach C." And standing beneath it, in 2 rows, helmets off, was the entire varsity squad, 42 kids. When they saw me, they started clapping. Not the polite kind, the real kind. The kind that starts slow and builds until it becomes something that vibrates in your chest. Marcus Rivera, the sophomore safety who had called 911 on the field that day, stepped forward and held out a football. I took it and turned it over. Signatures. Every single player. Written in silver marker along the laces and across the leather in handwriting that ranged from careful to nearly illegible. "Coach," Marcus said, "we are glad you are back." I held that football and looked at those boys, and I will tell you something honestly. That was the closest I came to breaking down in public. Closer than the hospital. Closer than the phone call with Shelby. Those 42 kids standing in the morning sun, who had watched their coach collapse on this exact field and had carried that with them for weeks, they showed up. They were there. I cleared my throat. Nodded. Said something about being glad to be back and how we had a season to finish. Coaching language. The kind of words you say when the real ones are too big to fit through your mouth. Dex walked beside me back to the field house after practice. He was quiet, which for Dex is roughly the equivalent of a fire alarm not going off. The man fills silence the way water fills a glass, automatically and completely. So when he is quiet, it means something. He waited until we were inside. He closed the door behind him. He sat down on the bench across from my desk, the same bench where I had given hundreds of halftime speeches, and he looked at the floor. "Right. Yeah. Are we going to talk about it?" I sat down at my desk. Same desk I had sat at for 11 years. Same window behind me that looked out onto the field where my heart had stopped. Someone had watered the plants on the sill. Dex, probably. "Talk about what?" I said. "You know what?" I looked at him, Dex Carter, who had eaten a questionable gas station burrito 30 minutes before a playoff game, and blamed his subsequent sideline emergency on food poisoning from the team dinner. Dex Carter, whose face was incapable of deception, the way a screen door is incapable of keeping out rain. Dex Carter, who had known something in that hospital room and chosen, out of love and loyalty and the specific terror of being the one to deliver news that would destroy his best friend, to stay quiet. "How long have you known?" I asked. He closed his eyes, let out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped inside his lungs for months. Then he told me. It had started, according to Dex, about 9 months ago. A spring game. Parents in the stands, boosters on the sideline, the usual Friday night atmosphere. Shelby had come to watch. She did that sometimes, sat in the 3rd row with the other coaches' wives, cheered at the right moments, left when the game was over. But that night Dex had seen her in the parking lot afterward, talking to a man. Not briefly, not casually. For 20 minutes, leaned against the man's car, laughing in a way that Dex described as not how you laugh with a stranger. The man was Bryce Holden. Bryce Holden, who was a real estate attorney with an office on Congress Avenue. Bryce Holden, who was 39, recently divorced, and had the kind of jawline and handshake combination that made people trust him before he even opened his mouth. Bryce Holden, who Shelby had originally met as a client when she was showing commercial properties downtown, a connection that made perfect professional sense and perfect personal cover. Dex said he had not thought much of it then. One conversation in a parking lot could have been anything. He started thinking more about it 5 months later, when he drove past the Lantana Ridge apartment complex on a Thursday night and saw Shelby's white Lexus parked in the visitor lot. A Thursday night. The night Shelby told me she had open house showings that ran late. Shelby had never once in 13 years of marriage shown a property past 8 o'clock at night. The woman believed that real estate, like football, had a schedule, and you respected it. I did not want to assume, Dex said. I could have been wrong, but you were not. He shook his head slowly. I should have told you sooner. You are telling me now. Right, Dex. I held up a hand. I am not angry at you. I promise. He looked at me the way everyone had been looking at me since the hospital, searching my face for the version they recognized. The loud one. The one who yelled at referees and made the whole sideline laugh, and called every player son and meant it. That version was still there. He just had a new roommate now, a quieter one who watched and listened and filed things away in a place where they would be useful later. Now, if you have made it this far, do me a quick favor. Hit that subscribe button. Most people listen to these stories all the way through and never do it. But it is what keeps this whole thing going. And trust me, what happens next is worth staying for. After Dex left, I sat in my office alone. I did not pace. I did not punch a wall. I did not call Shelby and demand an explanation. I did something that the old Reed Calloway would never have had the patience for. I simply paid attention. Bryce Holden, I discovered through the most basic research, a LinkedIn profile, and a firm directory, worked late on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Shelby, I now recalled, had started attending open house showings on Tuesday and Thursday evenings approximately 8 months ago. Before that, she had always been home by 6. Shelby had never held an open house past dinner in 13 years of selling real estate. The woman once told me that any buyer who could not make a decision by 5 o'clock was not serious enough to deserve her time. I also noticed her phone. It used to charge on the nightstand beside our bed. Now it charged in the bathroom. I noticed she had started laughing differently on certain calls. Lighter, almost girlish. Before walking to another room, I noticed new perfume on the dresser that she had never mentioned buying. I noticed that her gym bag, the one she carried to her supposed Thursday showings, never smelled like anything other than the inside of a car. Small things, individually meaningless. Together they formed a picture so complete, so perfectly clear, that it was almost impressive in its carelessness. She had not been hiding it well. She had simply never considered the possibility that I was watching. It was my daughter who finally broke it open. Not Dex, not a private investigator. Not some dramatic midnight discovery involving a phone left unlocked on a bathroom counter. A 16-year-old girl sitting on the edge of my bed at 11 o'clock on a Wednesday night, shaking like a leaf in a storm she had been standing in alone for 3 months. Shelby was out. A Thursday showing that had apparently been moved to Wednesday this week. I did not ask questions. I had stopped asking questions weeks ago. Questions were for people who did not already know the answers. Chloe knocked softly. 2 knocks. The way she had knocked since she was little, when she used to come to our bedroom door after a nightmare and stand there in her pajamas, waiting to be invited in. Come in, kid. She opened the door and stood there for a moment. She was wearing an old Westlake football shirt, one of mine, the kind that hung past her knees and made her look smaller and younger than she was. Her eyes were red. Not fresh red, the kind of red that comes from crying earlier and trying to stop and not quite succeeding. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands in her lap, fingers laced together so tightly her knuckles were white. She stared at the floor for what felt like a very long time. "Dad," she said. Her voice cracked on the word. Just that one word. Dad. The first word she ever learned to say, and somehow, in this moment, the heaviest. "I am right here, sweetheart. I need to tell you something and I am scared you are going to hate me." I sat up. moved closer, put my hand on both of hers. Chloe, look at me. She looked up. Her chin was trembling. There is nothing on this earth you could say to me that would make me hate you. Not now. Not ever. Do you understand me? She nodded, took a breath, and then, like a dam that had been holding back a river for 90 days finally giving way, it all came out. 3 months ago, a Saturday afternoon, Shelby had left her iPad on the kitchen counter. Chloe had picked it up to look something up for a school project. The messages were synced. iMessage, the same account as Shelby's phone. And there, in a conversation thread with a name Chloe did not recognize, were messages that no 16-year-old should ever have to read from her own mother. The name was Bryce. Chloe did not tell me what the messages said specifically. She did not need to. The look on her face told me everything about the content, and the fact that she had carried this knowledge for 3 months told me everything about the weight. She had not told anyone. Not her friends. Not her school counselor. Not Dex. Not me. She had held it alone, inside her chest, for 90 days. Through the start of the school year. Through my heart attack. Through 7 days of sitting beside my hospital bed, not knowing if I was going to wake up, carrying not just the terror of losing her father, but the knowledge that her mother was with another man, and the gut-destroying fear that if she told me it would kill me for real this time. She was trying to protect me. My 16-year-old daughter had taken on the full weight of an adult betrayal and carried it silently to protect her father's heart. The same heart that had stopped 3 times on a football field. I want you to understand something. I had already known about Bryce Holden. Dex had told me. I had seen the signs myself. I had assembled the picture, piece by piece, over the past several weeks, with the cold, analytical patience of a man who had come back from the dead and decided he was done being surprised. But this was different. This was not about Shelby anymore. This was about what Shelby had done to our daughter. Not intentionally, maybe. Not directly. But the carelessness of it. The recklessness of leaving an iPad synced. The selfishness of conducting an affair so openly that a child could stumble into it like walking into a room she was never supposed to enter. Shelby had not just betrayed me. She had turned our 16-year-old daughter into a secret keeper. She had placed the weight of her choices onto the shoulders of a girl who was still figuring out algebra and college applications, and who she wanted to be in the world. And that, more than the affair, more than Cancun, more than the empty chair in the hospital, was the thing I could not forgive. Chloe was crying now. Not the loud kind. The quiet kind. The kind that comes from relief and guilt and exhaustion all tangled together. I am sorry, Dad. I am so sorry. I should have told you. I wanted to tell you, but I was scared. I was scared it would break everything. I was scared it would hurt you. And then you were in the hospital. And I thought if I told you it might actually kill you, and I could not. I could not lose you too. I pulled her into my arms and held her. She buried her face in my shoulder, and I felt her whole body shake. And I held her the way I had held her when she was 5 and afraid of thunder. The way I had held her when she was 10, and the kids at school were cruel. The way a father holds his daughter when the world has handed her something far too heavy, and the only thing he can do is take it from her. We are going to be okay, kid. I said it into her hair. I said it like I meant it. I did mean it. We are going to be okay. She stayed for another 30 minutes. I made her hot chocolate in the kitchen, the way I used to when she was little. She drank it slowly. She looked lighter, like something physical had been lifted off her, and I suppose it had. The weight had transferred. It was on my shoulders now. After she went to bed, I stood in the shower for 3 minutes and cried. Not for Shelby, not for the marriage, for my daughter, for the 90 days she had spent alone with a secret that no child should ever have to carry. For the nights she must have lain awake in her room down the hall from us, hearing her mother laugh on the phone, knowing exactly who was on the other end, and saying nothing. 3 minutes. I let it out, all of it. Then I turned the water off, dried my face, got dressed, and sat down at my desk. I opened my laptop and logged into our bank accounts. Joint checking, joint savings, and the account I had set up when Chloe was born. The one Shelby and I had contributed to every month for 16 years. The one that was supposed to pay for our daughter's college education. The one that was supposed to be the most untouchable thing in our financial lives. The balance should have been $28,000. I knew this because I checked it every quarter. I had checked it 4 months ago, and it was exactly where it should have been. It was not where it should have been anymore. The balance was $412. $27,588 had been withdrawn in a single transaction 4 months ago. The transfer records led to a down payment on a lease, an apartment, under Shelby's name, at the Lantana Ridge complex, the same complex where Dex had seen her car on Thursday nights. She had used our daughter's college fund to set up an apartment for her affair. I stared at the screen. The numbers glowed in the dark of my office. I did not yell. I did not slam the laptop shut. I did not call anyone. I sat there the way a coach sits in the film room at 2 in the morning after a loss, watching the same play over and over, seeing exactly where it went wrong, understanding precisely what it cost, and quietly, methodically, building the game plan that will make sure it never happens again. I closed the laptop. I went to the kitchen. I stood by the window and looked out at the dark street and the neighbors' houses with their porch lights on and their normal lives inside them. And I made a decision. The next morning I made pancakes. Blueberry. Chloe's favorite. She came downstairs and we ate together at the kitchen table without saying much. She looked lighter, younger, almost like herself again. The weight had moved. It was on me now. But here is the thing about a man who has already died 3 times and come back. Weight does not scare him anymore. He just wants to know exactly how much he is carrying before he decides precisely where to set it down. Every good coach knows that the game is not won on the field. It is won in the film room, in the preparation, in the 1,000 quiet decisions that nobody sees. I was about to run the most important play of my life, and I was not going to call it until every single piece was exactly where it needed to be. Margaret Chen's office was on the 2nd floor of a small building on South Lamar, above a coffee shop that smelled like roasted beans and ambition. The office itself was modest. Clean desk, law books lining the walls, a framed photo of her son Danny in a Westlake football jersey on the shelf behind her chair. Danny Chen, wide receiver, class of 2021. A kid who had been headed absolutely nowhere good when he showed up to tryouts his sophomore year, with an attitude the size of Texas and the grades to match. I kept him on the team on one condition. He showed up to tutoring every morning at 6:30. He showed up every single morning. By senior year, he had a 3.5 GPA and a partial scholarship to Texas State. Margaret had come to my office the day Danny graduated. She sat in the chair across from my desk and cried quietly for about 2 minutes. Then she looked at me and said, "You saved my son. If you ever need anything in this life, Reed Calloway, you call me." I was calling her now. I sat across from her desk and told her everything. Bryce Holden, the apartment at Lantana Ridge, the iPad messages Chloe had found, and the $28,000 from our daughter's college fund that had been used to finance the whole thing. Margaret listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she opened her desk drawer, pulled out a yellow legal pad, and uncapped a pen. "Tell me everything again," she said, slowly, from the beginning, and do not leave anything out. The 5 weeks that followed were the strangest of my life. On the surface, everything was normal. Dinner at the table, television on the couch, Shelby asking about my health, my medication, my follow-up appointments with Dr. Patel. She was attentive now. Tender, even. The kind of tender that comes from guilt, which feels almost identical to love if you are not paying close attention. I was paying very close attention. And here is the thing that surprised me. The thing I did not expect. I was not miserable. I was not walking through the house drowning in heartbreak. I had cried exactly once, in the shower, for 3 minutes. A measured amount of grief for a very specific reason. Then I had turned the water off and started building. Because the man who came back from that hospital bed had decided something. He was not going to perform pain for an audience that was not watching. He was not going to beg. He was not going to warn. He was simply going to be ready. Margaret worked quietly and precisely. She was the kind of attorney who wore the same dark blazer every day and spoke in the measured voice of someone who believed that thoroughness was a form of kindness. Over 5 weeks, she did the following. She restructured the majority of our joint assets into a private trust that I controlled entirely. Every document reviewed 3 times. Every transfer legal, above board, and devastating. She confirmed that the house, our house, the 4-bedroom on Barton Creek Drive that Shelby and I had bought 9 years ago, was in my name. Shelby had been between jobs when we purchased it. The mortgage was under my credit, my signature, my name. Margaret reminded me of this with the quiet satisfaction of someone presenting a very good hand in a very important card game. She restored Chloe's college fund. Every cent of the $27,588 was traced, documented, and moved into a new account under my name with Chloe as the sole beneficiary. Shelby would not be able to touch it again. She filed for divorce. 11 days before the Saturday that was coming. The papers were ready. The timing was deliberate, and she prepared a formal ethics complaint against Bryce Holden to the Texas Real Estate Commission. The complaint documented a licensed real estate attorney who had engaged in a personal relationship with the spouse of a client, facilitated the misuse of a minor's education fund for a personal lease, and conducted himself in a manner that violated the professional standards of his licensing body. Margaret had drafted it with the precision of a woman who took professional ethics personally and found violations of them genuinely offensive. There was one other thing. Gloria called me. Shelby's mother, 68 years old, owner of a hair salon in Atlanta for 31 years. A woman who spoke her mind the way a river runs downhill, naturally, and without apology. Gloria had called me in the hospital on day 3 of my coma. Not Shelby. Gloria. She had sat on the phone with Francine and cried for 20 minutes asking about my condition. When I woke up, she called again. We talked for an hour. She said things a mother probably should not say about her own daughter. But the truth has a way of forcing itself out of people when the pressure gets high enough, and Gloria had apparently been holding pressure for a very long time. My daughter does not deserve you, she said. She never did. And whatever you decide to do, Reed, I am on your side. Gloria and I had stayed in touch through the 5 weeks. She knew what was coming. She supported it entirely. She asked only one thing. Take care of my granddaughter. That is the only thing I have ever been interested in doing, I told her. I remember the last normal evening clearly. It was a Thursday. We were on the couch. Something playing on the television that I could not tell you the name of. I was not watching. Shelby was curled on her side, feet tucked under a blanket, laughing at something on screen. Her phone was face down on the armrest. It was always face down now. I looked at her, really looked, and felt something I did not expect. Sadness, clean and uncomplicated. Not anger, not bitterness, just the quiet grief of a man watching the final minutes of something he used to love. You okay? She asked, catching me looking. Yeah, just thinking. About what? About how fast things change. She reached over and squeezed my hand. You have been through so much, babe. But you are okay now. I looked at our hands, hers on mine. 13 years of holding hands across couch cushions and kitchen counters, and hospital waiting rooms and parent-teacher conferences, and all the ordinary moments that make up a marriage you believe in completely. Yeah, I said softly. I squeezed back, for the last time. 3 days later, I changed the locks on the front door. I packed Shelby's things into suitcases and placed them neatly in the guest room closet, folded, organized, because I was not interested in cruelty. I was interested in precision. And then came Saturday, early November. The kind of Texas morning where the sky cannot decide between blue and gold, and eventually just gives you both. I was up at 6, showered, dressed, made coffee, scrambled eggs, sat at the kitchen table with an actual physical newspaper, because men who come back from the dead develop an appreciation for things that slow them down. Chloe was at her best friend's house. I had arranged that the night before. Told her I needed the house empty on Saturday. She looked at me and understood without asking. She hugged me at the door and said, "I love you, Dad." I said it back. Meant it more than I have ever meant anything. Shelby came downstairs at 8:15. Hair done. Light makeup. A white blouse and jeans that suggested casual but were carefully chosen. Meeting a buyer at 10. She said, "Sit." I said, "Eat before you go." She looked surprised. I had been cooking more since coming home from the hospital. Another change she had attributed to my new appreciation for life. She smiled. Sat down. I put a plate in front of her. We ate together like two people. In a perfectly normal marriage, on a perfectly normal Saturday morning. She had no idea she was sitting across from a man who was watching the final seconds of a countdown he had started 5 weeks ago. She left at 9. Kissed me on the cheek. "Back by 3, she said. I stood at the window and watched her car back out of the driveway and disappear down Barton Creek Drive. Then I picked up my phone and called Margaret Chen. "It is time," I said. "Everything is ready," she said. "Good." I poured my coffee. Let us begin. Now here is what Shelby did not know. She did not know about the trust. She did not know the joint savings account, which had held $195,000 2 months ago, now held exactly enough to cover the next 60 days of household bills and nothing more. She did not know the house was legally, entirely, unambiguously mine. She did not know that I had filed for divorce 12 days ago. She did not know that Chloe's college fund had been restored to the last cent. She did not know that a formal complaint was sitting on a desk at the Texas Real Estate Commission with Bryce Holden's name on it. She did not know the locks had been changed. And she did not know that her mother, Gloria, had called me that morning at 5:45 to say, "Give them hell, sweetheart." Now, if you are still listening, and you want stories like this to keep coming, it really helps if you hit that like button and subscribe. 97% of people who listen never do. But it is what keeps this whole thing running, so thank you. For real. The front door opened at 2:51. I know the exact time because I was watching the clock the way a coach watches the scoreboard in the final quarter. You can see what is coming. You have prepared for it. And still, when the whistle finally blows, there is something almost breathtaking about the sheer weight of the moment. Shelby walked in first. And she was not alone. Shelby walked through the front door laughing. She was turning back toward the doorway, saying something about the GPS taking them the wrong way on Mopac, when Bryce Holden stepped in behind her. He was carrying an overnight bag. "I want you to sit with that for a moment." Not a briefcase. Not a jacket draped over an arm. Not a folder of property documents or a laptop case or anything that could be explained away with a phone call and a quick improvisation. A full, zipped, this is more than a Saturday afternoon client meeting, overnight bag. They had not even looked toward the kitchen yet. Bryce saw me first. His hand, still on the strap of the bag, went absolutely still. The kind of still that only happens when every muscle in a man's body receives the same message at the same time, and that message is, "You are in the wrong house." I took a slow sip of my coffee. "Welcome home," I said. Pleasant. Calm. The voice of a man sitting at his own kitchen table on a Saturday afternoon with no particular place to be. "Bryce, right? We have never properly met. Reed Calloway." I nodded toward the chair across from me. "Sit down. Both of you. There are some things we should probably talk about." Shelby's face cycled through approximately 7 expressions in 4 seconds. I watched each one arrive and depart like weather systems crossing a radar screen. Shock, guilt, calculation. The very specific look of a person rapidly assembling a story from available materials. Fear. A brief flash of something that looked almost like anger. And then she landed on something that resembled offense, which, and I say this with full appreciation for the audacity required, was genuinely remarkable. Read, this is not what it. Shelby. I said it quietly, not harshly. The way you say someone's name when you need them to understand that the version of this conversation where they talk their way out is no longer available. It has been cancelled. The tickets are non-refundable. I am not angry. I genuinely mean that. Sit down. Bryce cleared his throat. Maybe I should. You should sit, I said, still pleasant, because what I am about to say involves you too, and I would rather say it once. They sat. I reached into the folder on the table beside my coffee mug. The same table where I had eaten breakfast with my daughter that morning. The same table where I had sat when Shelby came home from Cancun. The same table where I had learned to eat solid food again after a week in a coma. This table had seen everything. It was about to see one more thing. I slid 2 sets of papers across the surface. One to Shelby. One, which made her breath catch audibly, to Bryce. Those, I said, are divorce papers. Filed 11 days ago. I watched Shelby's eyes move across the first page. I watched the color leave her face the way light leaves a room when someone pulls the curtains shut. Margaret Chen handled everything. You may remember Margaret, Shelby. Her son Danny was on my team. Wide receiver. Good kid. She is very thorough. Shelby looked up from the papers. Her face had gone the color of dry concrete. The house, I continued, is in my name. Always was. You were between jobs when we bought it. The mortgage was under my credit. My signature. Margaret reminded me of that. Helpful woman. I took another sip of coffee. The joint account has enough to cover bills through January. After that, your attorney, and I strongly suggest you get one, will work with Margaret on the settlement. You will be taken care of, Shelby. I have never been interested in cruelty. I turned to look at Bryce Holden directly for the first time since they had walked in. I want to be honest about something. I had spent weeks building up a very specific image of this man in my head. I had turned him into something enormous. A villain. The jawline. The handshake. The Congress Avenue office. The recently divorced confidence. And the kind of charm that made people sign documents without reading them. I had made Bryce Holden into something that required defeating. Sitting across from me in my kitchen, caught, pale, his hands flat on the table like a man waiting to be sentenced, he just looked like a person. A person who had made a very bad decision and was only now beginning to understand the full dimensions of what that decision was going to cost him. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Bryce, I said. The Texas Real Estate Commission is going to receive a formal ethics complaint on Monday morning, co-signed by Margaret Chen. The complaint documents a licensed real estate attorney who engaged in a personal relationship with the spouse of a client and who facilitated the use of a minor's college education fund as a down payment on a personal lease at the Lantana Ridge apartment complex. I tilted my head slightly. You will want to call your broker Monday morning. Get ahead of it. The color drained from his face so completely and so quickly that it was, and I do not say this lightly, one of the most satisfying things I have witnessed in my 48 years on this earth. I let the silence sit for a moment. Then I played the last card. And Shelby? Chloe's college fund. The $28,000. I found it. Margaret found it. Every cent has been restored. My daughter's future is no longer something you get to spend. That was the one that broke her. Not the divorce papers, not the house, not the joint account, the college fund. Because even Shelby, even in that moment, understood what that money meant. It was not just money. It was the promise we had made to our daughter when she was born. And Shelby had spent it on an apartment for a man she was not married to while her husband was learning how to breathe again in a hospital bed. I picked up my coffee mug, took a long, slow sip. Any questions? Bryce left first. Quickly. Without the overnight bag. He had forgotten it entirely, which I found deeply, quietly hilarious and chose not to mention. There is a version of this story where Shelby cried and I softened. I want to be honest with you about that. She did cry. Eventually, the tears came after the shock, which came after a version of anger that lasted approximately 3 minutes before she looked at the papers again and reconsidered. She cried, and it was real. I believe that. Somewhere underneath everything that had happened, there was a woman who had once loved me genuinely, and that woman was grieving something too. But here is what I have learned about tears that arrive after consequences. They are not the same as remorse. They are the sound of a future that was expected. The house, the security, the man who coached football and made pancakes and loved his daughter louder than anything else in his life, disappearing in real time. She was not crying for me. She was crying for the version of me she had assumed would always be there. You planned all of this, she said, not accusing, almost wondering, while you were just here, making eggs, watching television, being normal. I was never quite normal after I came home, I said. You just were not watching closely enough to notice. She looked at me for a long moment. The longest look she had given me in years, maybe ever. Who are you? She said quietly. I considered the question seriously, because she deserved a serious answer. I am the man who coded 3 times on a football field in front of 40 kids, I said, and came back different. We talked for another hour after that. Actually talked, with an honesty that our marriage had apparently never been brave enough for while it was alive. She told me things. I told her things. It was the best conversation we had ever had, and also the last one we would ever have, as husband and wife. She left at 5 o'clock. I stood at the window and watched her car disappear down Barton Creek Drive for the last time. Then I picked up my phone and called Dex. I need you to come over, I said. Are you okay? I am excellent. Bring food. Not hospital food. Not cafeteria food. The brisket from Hal's on 6th Street. We are celebrating. A pause. Then, did you? Dex. Yeah? Bring the brisket. Dex arrived 40 minutes later with a full rack of brisket from Hal's on 6th Street, a 6-pack of root beer, because he knew I was not supposed to drink anything stronger yet, and the expression of a man who had been holding his breath for months and was only now being told he could finally exhale. He stood in the doorway and looked at me, looked at the kitchen table, looked at the 2 empty chairs where Shelby and Bryce had been sitting less than 2 hours ago, looked at the overnight bag still sitting by the front door where Bryce had abandoned it in his exit, which Dex stared at for a full 5 seconds, before looking back at me with an expression that can only be described as deeply satisfied confusion. Is that his? Dex asked. I nodded. He forgot his bag? He did. Dex set the brisket down on the counter. He put his hands on his hips, and he laughed. A single, short, disbelieving laugh that contained more joy than most full conversations. We sat at the kitchen table. The same chairs. But the room felt different now. Lighter, like someone had opened a window that had been painted shut for 13 years, and the air was finally moving again. I told him everything. From the beginning. Margaret. The trust. The house. The college fund. The complaint. The locks. The eggs that morning. The countdown. The look on Bryce Holden's face when I mentioned the Texas Real Estate Commission, which I described in detail because some things deserve to be savored and shared with the people who earned the right to enjoy them. Dex listened without interrupting. This alone was a miracle roughly on par with my surviving 3 cardiac arrests. The man once interrupted a pastor at his own cousin's wedding to correct a football statistic in the sermon. Silence is not his natural state. But he sat there, hands wrapped around a root beer, and let me tell every piece of it without saying a word. When I finished, he sat back, looked at the ceiling, exhaled, like a man releasing something he had been carrying in his chest since the day he found me face down on the 40-yard line. Reed, he said. Yeah, you are the most terrifyingly calm human being I have ever coached alongside in my entire life. I laughed. A real one. The full, loud, unguarded kind that starts deep in your chest. The same chest that had stopped beating on a Tuesday in October and decided, against every reasonable odd, to keep going. It was the kind of laugh that fills a kitchen. The kind that makes the walls feel warmer. The kind you only get back after you have lost something enormous and realize that the thing you have left is enough. It felt like the first truly free breath I had taken in 13 years. I want to tell you where I am now. Not because you need to know, but because I think you deserve to hear how this ends. The divorce was finalized 4 months later, clean as promised. Margaret was thorough, in the way that only a woman who has been personally wronged by carelessness can be thorough. Shelby received what was fair and nothing extra. The court saw the college fund. The court saw the apartment lease. The court saw the Cancun trip that happened while a man was in a coma. Shelby did not fight for custody. Her attorney advised against it. The judge would not have been sympathetic. Chloe lives with me. Bryce Holden is currently navigating a very uncomfortable review process with the Texas Real Estate Commission. Dex tells me this with the energy of a man who finds it spiritually nourishing, and I allow him this pleasure because he has earned it. I sold the house on Barton Creek Drive. Bought a smaller place on the east side of town. 2 bedrooms. A back porch. A lot less square footage. A lot less performing. A lot less maintaining the appearance of a life that was built for an audience that was never really watching. Just enough space for a man, a good grill, and the very clear understanding that every single person inside that house chose to be there. Dex comes over every Friday. He brings brisket from Hal's. We sit on the back porch and talk about the team and the season, and whatever ridiculous thing happened at practice that week, and sometimes we do not talk at all, which is its own kind of conversation. He is Uncle Dex to Chloe now. Officially. She made him a card. He cried. He denied crying. I have photographic evidence. The team won the state championship that December. I stood on the sideline at AT&T Stadium in Arlington and watched 42 kids in green and gold play the best football I have ever seen in my coaching career. When the final whistle blew and those boys rushed the field, someone in the student section unfurled a banner. Handmade. Green paint on a white bedsheet. For Coach C. Dex was standing beside me. He put his hand on my shoulder and did not say anything. He did not need to. Some moments are too full for words. You just stand inside them and let them be what they are. Dr. Patel cleared me for full activity at my 6-month checkup. He shook my hand at the end of the appointment and looked at me over his glasses, with the expression of a man who had seen a great many patients come through his care and did not often get to see them like this. You look better than any patient I have ever coded 3 times, he said. I feel better than I ever have, I said. And I meant it completely. Francine passed me in the corridor on the way out. She stopped, looked me up and down with the practiced eye of a woman who had watched people heal and people not heal and knew the difference intimately. You good, Coach? She said. I smiled. The real one. The kind that starts somewhere behind your eyes and reaches all the way down. Francine, I said, I am absolutely magnificent. Gloria calls every Sunday morning at 8. We talk about Chloe. We talk about the weather in Atlanta. We talk about her salon and my team and the small, ordinary things that make up a life that is actually being lived instead of performed. She sent Chloe a plane ticket for Christmas. Chloe came back with cornrows and a pecan pie recipe, and the biggest smile I had seen on her face in a year. 2 weeks ago, I drove Chloe to look at the University of Texas at Austin. We walked the campus together. She talked about majoring in psychology, about wanting to understand why people do the things they do. I told her that was a question worth spending a lifetime on. On the drive home, she was quiet for a while, looking out the window at the Texas hill country rolling past, all limestone and live oaks, and that particular golden light that only happens here in the late afternoon. Dad, she said. Yeah, kid. Thank you for staying. I looked at my daughter, 16 years old, brave enough to carry a secret that would have broken most adults, strong enough to hand it over when it mattered, kind enough to forgive a world that had asked far too much of her, far too young. Sweetheart, I said. I did not just stay. I came back. They say when you die and come back, you are supposed to have seen a light. I did not see a light. What I saw was clarity. A clean, quiet, merciless clarity about what matters and what does not. About who shows up and who does not. About who a man truly is when the scoreboard is dark and the stadium is empty and there is nobody left to perform for. I believe God gives us moments like that not as punishment, but as correction. A hand on the shoulder, a whisper in the silence, a second chance we did not earn but are given anyway, because grace does not operate on logic, it operates on love. And sometimes the most loving thing the Lord can do is let a man's heart stop so that his eyes can finally open. I died on a Tuesday at 3:17 on a football field in Austin, Texas. 40 kids watched it happen. My best friend breathed life back into my chest. My daughter sat beside me for 7 days and never left. And the man who came back from all of that, the quiet one, the calm one, the one who watches and waits and loves the people who actually show up, he was the best thing that ever happened to me. If this story touched your heart, I would be grateful if you shared it with someone who needs to hear it today. Hit that like button, subscribe if you have not already, and leave a comment telling me about a time someone showed you who they really were. I read every single one, and as always, thank you for being here. It means more than you know.